Commander Zexhai of the Caltharian Defense Fleet had seen many species across the galaxy, but none quite like the humans. Standing barely 2 meters tall, lacking natural armor or enhanced sensory organs, they seemed almost fragile compared to the towering Caltharians with their crystalline exoskeletons and the swift Nithek warriors with their razor-sharp claws. Yet here they were, volunteering for what many considered a suicide mission against the Voidborn invasion. The briefing room aboard the massive dreadnought Starfall buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 12 different species had gathered for what might be their last coordinated defense against an enemy that had already consumed 17 star systems. The Voidborn were unlike anything the galaxy had faced before, shadowy entities that seemed to feed on stellar energy itself, leaving behind dead systems and twisted space where nothing could survive. The situation is dire, Admiral Korthnex announced, her 4 arms gesturing toward the holographic display showing the advancing Voidborn front. Our combined fleets have suffered catastrophic losses. Traditional weapons appear ineffective against their energy-absorbing capabilities. We estimate 3 standard cycles before they reach the core worlds. Murmurs of despair rippled through the assembled commanders. The hegemony's most advanced weapons had proved useless. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, even reality-warping devices had been absorbed or neutralized by the enemy. Several species had already begun evacuation protocols, accepting the inevitable. Then, Captain Sarachun of the Human Expeditionary Force stood up. At barely 1.8 meters, she was dwarfed by most beings in the room, yet something in her posture commanded attention. "Admiral, with respect, we haven't tried everything." Korthnex's secondary eyes focused on the human. "Captain Shun, your species' contributions are valued, but your ships lack the firepower of our heavy cruisers." "What could you possibly, not firepower?" Chen interrupted, causing several aliens to bristle at the breach of protocol. "Tactics. The Voidborn might absorb energy, but they're still operating under physical laws. They have patterns, weaknesses that can be exploited through coordinated strikes and psychological warfare." The room erupted in confused chatter. Psychological warfare against entities that appeared to lack individual consciousness seemed absurd. Commander Zexhai, however, found himself intrigued. He had studied human military history during their integration into the hegemony. Their wars were brutal affairs, fought not just with superior technology, but with cunning, adaptation, and an almost supernatural ability to find weaknesses in seemingly invincible enemies. "Explain," Admiral Korthnex said, her tone skeptical but willing to listen. Chen activated her personal holoprojector, displaying tactical formations that looked unlike anything the assembled commanders had seen. Instead of the traditional line battles favored by hegemony doctrine, the human formations were fluid, organic, designed to react and adapt in real time. "The Voidborn attack in predictable patterns," Chen began. "They prioritize high-energy targets, capital ships, space stations, anything with significant power signatures. They're like cosmic predators, drawn to the biggest prey. But what if we use that against them?" She manipulated the display, showing smaller ships, mostly human corvettes and frigates, weaving between larger hegemony vessels in complex patterns. "We use our heavy ships as bait, but the real damage comes from coordinated strikes by smaller, more agile vessels. The Voidborn won't see us as threats until it's too late." General Vorth of the Nithek war clan scoffed. "Human ships are barely armed. Your largest vessels couldn't pierce a cruiser's shields, let alone damage these entities." "You're thinking in terms of raw destruction," Chen replied calmly. "But the Voidborn have shown one consistent vulnerability. They struggle to process multiple simultaneous attacks from different vectors. Their absorption field has limits. Overwhelm those limits with precise, coordinated strikes, and we can create windows of opportunity for the heavy ships to deliver killing blows." Zexhai leaned forward, studying the tactical display more carefully. The human proposal was audacious, requiring split-second timing and perfect coordination between species that had never fought together as integrated units. One mistake would result in the smaller ships being vaporized. "The casualty rates," he began, "will be high," Chen acknowledged without flinching. "Human ships will likely suffer 60 to 70% losses. But if we can stop even one Voidborn dreadnought, it's worth the sacrifice." And if the tactic works, we can refine it, teach it to other fleets. The room fell silent. The idea of deliberately accepting such massive casualties went against every principle of hegemony military doctrine. Their advanced civilizations had long ago moved beyond the primitive concept of acceptable losses. Wars were fought by drones and automated systems, with organic life carefully protected behind layers of technology. But the humans were different. They came from a world that had forged them in constant conflict, not just against each other, but against their environment, natural disasters, predators, and the very elements themselves. They understood sacrifice in ways that more advanced species had forgotten. Admiral Korthnex studied the tactical display for long moments. Even if this works, we're asking human crews to fly into certain death. Not certain, Chun corrected. Probable. But humans have been beating impossible odds for millennia. It's what we do. She gestured, and the display shifted to show historical human conflicts. Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off a vast Persian army. Britain standing alone against Nazi Germany. The defense of Earth during the First Contact War, where primitive human ships had somehow repelled a superior alien invasion through sheer audacity and tactical innovation. Every species in this room has contributed something vital to the hegemony, Chin continued. The Caltharians gave us crystal technology and architectural mastery. The Nithek taught us honor in combat. The Vorthak shared their understanding of quantum mechanics. Humans, we contribute the one thing that advanced civilizations sometimes lose, which is, Admiral Korthnex asked, the willingness to do what others consider impossible. Commander Zexhai felt something stirring in his consciousness, an emotion that Caltharian society had largely bred out of their people over centuries of peaceful evolution. It took him a moment to recognize it as inspiration. The humans weren't just proposing a military tactic. They were offering to sacrifice themselves for species they'd only known for a few decades. I volunteer the 3rd Caltharian Battle Group to support this operation, Zexhai announced, surprising himself as much as the others. If humans are willing to die for this plan, the least we can do is ensure their sacrifice has maximum impact. General Vortha's claws extended slightly, a sign of agitation among his people. This is madness. We're talking about throwing away lives on an untested theory. Tested, Chun corrected. Human military history is filled with examples of numerically superior forces defeated through superior tactics and coordination. What we lack in technology, we make up for in adaptability. She activated another display, showing void-borne attack patterns analyzed from previous engagements. Look at the data. The enemy follows mathematical precision in their movements, efficient, optimized, but predictable. They don't account for chaotic variables, for actions that don't follow logical parameters. Because chaos is inefficient, pointed out Dr. SYLLTH, the hegemony's chief military strategist. Random actions lead to higher casualty rates and resource waste. Chaos, yes, Chin agreed. But controlled chaos, what others call recklessness, we call calculated risk. The Voidborn have conquered 17 systems by facing predictable enemies using predictable tactics. They've never fought humans. The debate continued for another hour, with species after species weighing in on the proposal. Some supported it out of desperation. They were losing the war anyway. Others argued for continued evacuation, preserving what they could rather than risking everything on one gamble. Finally, Admiral Korthnex called for a vote. The result was narrow, 7 species in favor, 5 against. Enough to authorize the operation, but barely. Very well, the Admiral announced. Operation Longshot is approved. Captain Shun, you'll have operational command of all light vessels. Commander Zexhai, your battle group will provide heavy support and extraction capabilities for any surviving human ships. Shin nodded grimly. Thank you, Admiral. We won't waste this opportunity. As the meeting dispersed, Zexhai approached the human captain. Up close, he could see the weight she carried. Not just the responsibility of command, but the knowledge that she was leading her people into almost certain death. Captain, he said carefully, may I ask you something? Of course, Commander. Why are you willing to do this? Your species only joined the hegemony 30 years ago. You owe us nothing, certainly not the lives of your crews. Chen was quiet for a moment, staring out at the stars visible through the observation deck. "Commander, have you ever heard of the Australian light horse at Beersheba?" Zexai's translator struggled with the unfamiliar terms. "I'm afraid not. Old Earth, First World War. Australian cavalry charged in trench machine gun positions with nothing but horses and rifles. Military historians called it suicide, mounted cavalry against modern weapons. But they broke through, won the battle, changed the course of the entire campaign. How? Because the enemy was prepared for everything except someone crazy enough to charge machine guns on horseback. Sometimes the impossible works precisely because it's impossible." She turned to face him, and Zexai saw something in her eyes that his people had lost long ago. The fire that drove a species to leap into the unknown rather than accept defeat. "Besides," Chen added with a slight smile, "someone once told me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being terrified." Over the next 18 hours, the combined fleet prepared for what might be its final battle. Human ships spread throughout the formation, their small crews running constant drills with their alien counterparts. The coordination required was staggering. Each human vessel needed to know exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment, while simultaneously adapting to changing battlefield conditions. Zexai found himself spending more time aboard human vessels, ostensibly to coordinate tactical integration, but increasingly out of fascination with their approach to warfare. Unlike Caltharian ships with their perfectly ordered efficiency or Nithek vessels focused on individual glory, human ships felt alive. Crews moved with practiced chaos, adapting instantly to changing orders, improvising solutions to problems that hadn't existed moments before. "It's organized pandemonium," explained Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez when Zexai commented on the apparent disorder. "Every person knows their job, but they also know everyone else's job. When things go wrong, and they always go wrong in battle, we adapt." The human ships themselves reflected this philosophy. Where alien vessels were specialized for specific roles, human ships were modular, adaptable. A frigate could reconfigure itself for reconnaissance, assault, or support roles within hours. Their weapons systems could be modified on the fly, adapted to whatever the situation demanded. "We learned early that no plan survives contact with the enemy," Captain Chen explained during one of their coordination meetings. "So we planned for the plan to fail." On the bridge of the Starfall, Admiral Korthnex watched the final preparations with growing unease. Long-range sensors had detected the approaching Void-born fleet. 3 massive dreadnoughts accompanied by dozens of smaller vessels, all crackling with the dark energy that had proven so devastating to conventional forces. "Estimated time to contact, 4 hours," reported the sensor operator. Shun stood at her mobile command station, coordinating with her scattered fleet through quantum entanglement communicators. "All human vessels report ready, Admiral. We'll begin deployment in 30 minutes. Korthnex nodded, then activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Korthnex. Today we make our stand against an enemy that has shown no mercy to our worlds, our people, or our children. Some say the odds are against us, but I look at this fleet and see something the Void-born haven't encountered before. Unity between species who choose to fight together rather than die separately." She paused, gathering herself for what might be her final address. "Today, we learn what happens when the galaxy's greatest tacticians fight alongside beings crazy enough to charge machine guns on horseback." A few chuckles echoed through the comm channels, humans who appreciated the reference. But there was still underneath the humor, the quiet determination of people who had made peace with death in service of something greater. As the human ships began their complex deployment pattern, spreading through the fleet in configurations that looked random but followed careful mathematical principles, Zexai felt that unfamiliar emotion stirring again. For the first time in his military career, he was about to fight alongside beings who truly understood what it meant to be warriors. The Void-born were coming, bringing with them the same dark fate that had befallen 17 systems. But today, for the first time, they would face an enemy that didn't follow their rules. Today, they would fight humans. The first sight of the Void-born fleet left even veteran commanders speechless. Where normal ships reflected starlight or glowed with engine fire, these vessels seemed to absorb light itself, creating holes in space that hurt to look at directly. The three dreadnoughts dwarfed even the largest hegemony vessels, their impossible geometries shifting and flowing like liquid darkness given form. "Contact in 20 minutes, reported the sensor operator, her voice carefully controlled despite the obvious terror in her readings. Voidborn formation maintaining standard approach pattern. Commander Zexai studied the tactical display from his position aboard the Starfall, watching as the human vessels completed their final positioning. Captain Chen's plan called for the human ships to remain hidden among the larger vessels until the last possible moment, using their energy signatures to mask the smaller craft's presence. "All human vessels, this is Chun," came the captain's voice over the tactical channel. "Remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to make them think they're in a fair fight until it's too late for them to adapt." The hegemony fleet moved into traditional battle formation, massive dreadnoughts and battleships forming a line of battle, with cruisers and destroyers in supporting positions. To external sensors, it looked like standard hegemony doctrine, exactly what the Voidborn had encountered and defeated 17 times before. What couldn't be detected from the outside were the human corvettes and frigates nestled against the hulls of larger ships, their engines cold, their crews waiting in tense silence. 43 human vessels, carrying barely 8,000 souls, preparing to face an enemy that had consumed billions. "Voidborn fleet entering extreme weapons range," announced the tactical officer. Energy buildup detected on lead dreadnought. Admiral Korthnex straightened in her command chair. "All ships prepare for..." The first Voidborn salvo cut across space like a wound in reality itself. The dark energy beams struck the hegemony line, and 3 destroyers simply ceased to exist, their matter converted into the same shadow stuff that composed the enemy fleet. But instead of the expected follow-up barrage, something unexpected happened. "Admiral," shouted the sensor operator, "the human ships are launching." Across the fleet, 43 small vessels suddenly burst from their hiding places like a swarm of angry insects. They didn't move in formation or follow predictable attack patterns. Instead, they scattered in every direction, each ship following its own seemingly random course, while somehow maintaining perfect coordination through quantum-encrypted communication channels. Aboard the corvette Indomitable, Lieutenant Sarah Kim felt her stomach lurch as her pilot threw their ship into a spiraling attack run that would have been impossible for any other species to survive. Humans had evolved on a world where survival meant adapting to rapid changes. Their inner ears could handle acceleration that would incapacitate other species, their reaction times honed by millions of years of dodging predators and natural disasters. "Target the sensor clusters on that escort," Kim ordered, her fingers flying over targeting controls. "Remember, we're not trying to kill it, just blind it." The Indomitable's weapons were laughably small compared to the Voidborn vessel they approached. Particle beams that would barely scratch a capital ship's armor. But Kim wasn't aiming for armor. She was aiming for the small, seemingly insignificant protrusions that her briefing materials had identified as sensory organs. Around her, 42 other human ships were executing similar attacks, each targeting specific subsystems on different Voidborn vessels. The enemy's energy absorption fields activated, trying to drain power from the incoming attacks, but they had been designed to handle massive energy discharges from capital ships, not dozens of smaller attacks from multiple directions. "Like trying to catch raindrops with a bucket," muttered Ensign Torres from a navigation station, echoing Captain Chen's earlier analogy. The first wave of human attacks struck almost simultaneously. Individually, each strike was negligible, barely enough to damage a Voidborn ship's outer hull. But collectively, they created something unprecedented: confusion. For the first time since the Voidborn invasion began, the enemy fleet hesitated. Their perfect formations wavered as individual ships found their sensors disrupted, their targeting systems struggling to track dozens of small, fast-moving targets that didn't follow any recognizable pattern. "Now," Captain Chen's voice cut through the tactical channel. "All heavy units, concentrated fire on the lead dreadnought." The hegemony's capital ships opened fire in perfect coordination, every weapon focused on a single target. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and Reality warping devices struck the void-born dreadnought at the moment when its absorption field was overloaded trying to process input from 43 different directions. For a brief, glorious moment, the dark energy field flickered. The void-born dreadnought shuddered as actual damage registered on its hull. The first time any hegemony weapon had successfully harmed one of the massive vessels. But the victory was short-lived. The void-born adapted with terrifying speed, their formation shifting to protect the damaged dreadnought, while smaller vessels moved to intercept the human ships. Shadow energy beams lashed out, and the corvette, Defiant, simply vanished in a burst of dark light. Defiant is gone, reported the communications officer, her voice tight with controlled grief. No survivors. Stay focused, Chun ordered. Remember the plan? Martinez, execute pattern Delta 7. The human ships shifted formation again, but this time something was different. Instead of scattering randomly, they moved with purpose, each ship taking position to support the others. When void-born beams targeted the frigate Resilience, 2 corvettes materialized on either side, their defensive fields overlapping to create a protective barrier. Commander HFY watched in amazement as the human vessels began executing maneuvers that should have been impossible. Ships passed within meters of each other at velocities that would have been fatal if their timing had been off by even microseconds. They shared shield harmonics, creating defensive networks that allowed smaller vessels to survive hits that should have destroyed them instantly. How are they doing that? He asked Captain Chun, who was coordinating the battle from her command station aboard the Starfall. Trust, Chun replied simply. Every pilot in that formation would trust their wingmen with their life, because they are trusting them with their lives. The battle developed into something unlike anything in recorded military history. The Void-born, accustomed to overwhelming enemies through superior firepower and energy absorption, found themselves forced to react rather than dictate terms. Human ships would appear, strike specific targets, then disappear into the sensor shadows cast by larger vessels before the enemy could respond effectively. But the cost was horrific. The destroyer Courage died, covering a withdrawal, its crew of 300 vaporized in an instant. The corvette Phoenix managed to ram a void-born escort before being destroyed, both ships disappearing in a flash of annihilating energies. One by one, human vessels were being eliminated. Casualty report, Admiral Korthnax requested grimly. 14 human ships destroyed, 6 more heavily damaged, came the reply. But, Admiral, look at this. The tactical display shifted to show void-born fleet positions. For the first time in any engagement, the enemy formation was in disarray. 2 escort vessels had been destroyed outright, and the lead dreadnought was showing significant damage. More importantly, the Void-born were reacting defensively, their perfect mathematical formations abandoned in favor of protective stances. They're learning, Chen observed, but they're learning to fight the wrong enemy. She activated the general comm channel. All human vessels, execute Phase 2. Time to show them what we learned from the Mongols. HFY's translator struggled with the reference, but the meaning became clear as the human formation shifted again. Instead of the coordinated assault pattern they'd been using, the ships scattered completely, becoming individual raiders striking from unexpected directions. The frigate Intrepid appeared from behind a damaged hegemony cruiser, launching a spread of modified torpedoes before vanishing back into the defensive formation. The corvette Swift and Daring executed a paired strike on a Void-born destroyer, their combined firepower overwhelming the vessel's defenses before it could adapt. But the most spectacular maneuver came from the heavy frigate Thunderbolt, whose captain had apparently decided that conventional tactics weren't aggressive enough. The ship accelerated directly toward the damaged Void-born dreadnought, its engines glowing white-hot with overload. Thunderbolt, what are you doing? Chen's voice cut through the comm channel. Sir, our engines are damaged, and we're losing life support, came the comm reply from Captain Morrison. Permission to try something stupid? Chen was quiet for a moment, understanding what Morrison was proposing. Granted. Give them hell, Captain. The Thunderbolt continued its acceleration run, drawing fire from every Void-born weapon that could track it. But instead of ramming the dreadnought, Morrison cut engines at the last second and, activated every thruster in a desperate braking maneuver that brought his ship to a relative stop just meters from the enemy vessel's hull. From that range, even light human weapons could penetrate the dreadnought's defenses. The Thunderbolt opened fire with everything it had, pouring energy directly into the massive ship's superstructure, while Voidborn weapons tried frantically to target something too close for their systems to track effectively. The exchange lasted perhaps 10 seconds before the Thunderbolt was finally destroyed, but in that time, Captain Morrison and his crew had accomplished what no hegemony vessel had managed in 17 systems. They had crippled a Voidborn dreadnought. The massive enemy ship began listing, dark energies bleeding from multiple hull breaches. Its weapons fell silent as internal systems struggled to compensate for the damage. All heavy units, target the damaged dreadnought. Admiral Korth next commanded. Pour everything into it. The combined firepower of the hegemony fleet struck the wounded vessel like a hammer blow. Already weakened by the Thunderbolt's sacrifice, the dreadnought's defenses finally collapsed. The great ship broke apart in slow motion, its impossible geometries unraveling as the dark energies that held it together dissipated into space. A cheer went up across the fleet, the first Voidborn dreadnought to be destroyed in the entire war. But the celebration was brief. The remaining Voidborn vessels were adapting, their formations tightening as they began focusing on the human ships with murderous efficiency. "We're losing too many ships," reported the tactical officer. Human fleet strength down to 60%. Captain Chin studied the tactical display, her expression grim but determined. Around her, the bridge crew of the Starfall worked with quiet efficiency, but HFY could see the strain on their faces. They were winning, but at a cost that would have broken most civilizations. Phase 3, Chin announced. All remaining human vessels, prepare for final gambit. We're going to show them why you never corner a desperate human. She turned to Admiral Korth next. "Admiral, I need you to order all heavy units to fall back. What we're about to do, you don't want to be close." Korth next hesitated. "Captain, you've already given more than anyone could ask. If you need extraction, no extraction," Chun said firmly. "But if this works, we're going to need every surviving heavy unit to follow up. Trust me, Admiral." One more time. The remaining human vessels, barely 20 ships out of the original 43, began moving into a formation that made even less sense than their previous maneuvers. Instead of spreading out or coordinating their attacks, they were clustering together, moving as a single unit directly toward the center of the Voidborn formation. "They're going to get slaughtered," General Vorth observed from his command ship. But Commander HFY was beginning to understand human tactics. "No," he said slowly. "They're going to do something that makes no tactical sense whatsoever. Which means the Voidborn won't see it coming." The human formation accelerated toward certain death. 20 small ships against the remaining might of an alien invasion fleet. Voidborn weapons charged, preparing to vaporize the humans in a single coordinated salvo. That's when Captain Chin revealed what humans call their ace in the hole. The 20 remaining human ships moved in perfect formation toward the heart of the Voidborn fleet. Their approach so direct and seemingly suicidal that even the alien strategists struggled to understand their purpose. Every sensor in the combined fleets focused on the small vessels as they closed the distance at maximum burn, their engines glowing like stars against the darkness. "Human formation will reach firing range in 30 seconds, reported the tactical officer aboard the Starfall. "Voidborn vessels are charging weapons for concentrated barrage." Admiral Korth next gripped her command chair, watching what appeared to be the final moments of humanity's contribution to the defense. "Captain Chun, whatever you're planning, trust us," Chun interrupted, her voice carrying an odd note of anticipation rather than desperation. "Humans have been perfecting this maneuver for 3,000 years." Commander HFY studied the tactical display, trying to understand what he was seeing. The human formation was tight, too tight for effective combat maneuvering. If the Voidborn opened fire, every ship would be caught in the same kill zone. It violated every principle of space combat he'd ever learned. Then, with 5 seconds until the enemy fired, the human formation did something that redefined HFY's understanding of tactical possibilities. They scattered, but it wasn't random. 20 ships exploded outward in a perfect sphere, each vessel following a precisely calculated trajectory that took it exactly where it needed to be. In less than 3 seconds, the tight formation had become 20 individual attack vectors, each ship approaching a different target from an angle the Voidborn couldn't have anticipated. The alien weapons fired into empty space, their targeting systems unable to track 20 targets, moving in 20 different directions from what had been a single contact just moments before. "Impossible," breathed General Vorth over the comm channel. "The coordination required." "Welcome to human space combat doctrine," Chen replied. "We call it the Starburst maneuver. Every pilot trains for 6 years just to execute it without killing themselves." The human ships struck the Voidborn formation like a shotgun blast, each vessel targeting specific points that their previous attacks had identified as vulnerable. But this time, they weren't trying to blind or confuse. This time, they were going for kills. The Corvette Vengeance, piloted by Commander Sarah Kim, rolled through a complex spiral that brought her guns to bear on the power coupling of a Voidborn destroyer. Her targeting computer had been programmed with data from every previous engagement, calculating exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. The destroyer's absorption field tried to drain her weapons, but Kim had saved power for this moment, channeling everything her ship had into a single, focused burst. The Voidborn vessel's power coupling exploded, sending cascading failures throughout its hull. Dark energy bled from multiple ruptures as the destroyer lost containment, its exotic matter core destabilizing. Across the formation, similar scenes played out. The frigate Retribution sacrificed its shields to ram through a Voidborn cruiser sensor array, leaving the enemy ship blind and vulnerable. The Corvette Justice executed a maneuver that should have been physically impossible, using gravitational slingshot effects around a larger vessel to achieve velocities that allowed its kinetic weapons to penetrate Voidborn armor. But the most spectacular attack came from the heavy frigate Determination, whose captain had apparently decided that conventional weapons weren't sufficient for the task at hand. "Control, this is Captain Rodriguez," came the steady voice over the comm, requesting permission to attempt experimental tactic. Chen's response was immediate. "Granted. Show them what humans do when we're out of conventional options." Rodriguez had been studying Voidborn energy patterns throughout the battle, and he'd noticed something that even the hegemony scientists had missed. The alien vessels didn't just absorb energy. They stored it temporarily before converting it to their own use. That storage created a brief window of vulnerability if someone was crazy enough to exploit it. The Determination accelerated directly toward the second Voidborn dreadnought, drawing massive amounts of fire from the alien vessel's defensive systems. But instead of trying to avoid the energy beams, Rodriguez flew directly into them, allowing his ship to be struck by the dark energy weapons. Determination report. Chun called out as the human ship disappeared into the alien energy discharge. "Still here, Control," Rodriguez replied, his voice tight with concentration. "Beginning feedback sequence." What happened next violated several laws of physics and most principles of sanity. Instead of being destroyed by the Voidborn energy beams, the Determination had somehow modified its shields to temporarily contain the alien energy. The ship emerged from the energy discharge glowing with the same dark power that had destroyed so many other vessels. Returning to sender, Rodriguez announced. The Determination opened fire, but instead of its normal weapons, it discharged the captured Voidborn energy directly back at the dreadnought. The alien vessel's absorption field tried to reclaim the energy, but it was already attuned to Voidborn frequencies. The feedback created a resonance cascade that tore through the massive ship's defenses like paper. The second dreadnought began breaking apart, its exotic matter core losing containment as internal systems overloaded. Captain Rodriguez had just accomplished what theoretical physicists had declared impossible, turning the Voidborn's own weapons against them. "How do they do that?" demanded Dr. HFY over the command channel. "Humans don't accept that something is impossible," Chen replied. "We just consider it a more interesting engineering challenge." But the cost of these victories was becoming clear. Of the 20 human ships that had executed the Starburst maneuver, only 8 remained operational. The Corvette Swift had been vaporized, covering the Vengeance's attack run. The frigate Courage had sacrificed itself to create an opening for the Determination's impossible gambit. One by one, humanity's finest ships and crews were paying the ultimate price for victory. The remaining Voidborn dreadnought, apparently recognizing the threat the human ships represented, began focusing all its efforts on eliminating them. Dark energy beams lashed out with murderous precision, and the corvette's hope and defiance disappeared within seconds of each other. Human fleet strength down to critical levels, reported the tactical officer. 6 ships remaining. Admiral Korthnex activated the fleet-wide comm. All human vessels, you have accomplished the impossible. Fall back for extraction. You've done enough. But Captain Chin's response surprised everyone. Negative, Admiral. We're not done yet. The 3rd dreadnought is the command ship. Take it out, and the entire invasion force becomes significantly less coordinated. She paused, studying the tactical display. Besides, we still have 1 card to play. The 6 remaining human ships, the heavy frigate Indomitable, the destroyer Relentless, the corvettes Phoenix, Thunder, and Solidarity, and Chin's own command ship, the heavy cruiser Humanity's Pride, began moving in another formation that made no apparent tactical sense. Instead of attacking, they were arranging themselves in a protective formation around the Humanity's Pride. To external observers, it looked like the survivors were preparing for a defensive last stand. Captain, Zexai said carefully, what are you planning? Chin's smile was visible even over the tactical channel, the expression of someone about to attempt something that would either be remembered as brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Commander, have you ever heard of the Battle of Leyte Gulf? Zexai's translator provided no context for the reference. Old Earth, Second World War, Chin explained as her ships moved into their final positions. American destroyers charged an entire Japanese fleet to protect their aircraft carriers. Military historians called it the most gallant naval action in history. And the result? Zexai asked, though he suspected he already knew. The destroyers were sunk, but they bought enough time for the carriers to escape. Sometimes, Commander, victory isn't about surviving. Sometimes it's about making sure the next battle can be won. The Humanity's Pride began powering up systems that hadn't been active during the battle. Not weapons, but something far more dangerous to the Voidborn. The ship's experimental quantum resonance generator, a device that most scientists considered too unstable for practical use. You're not seriously considering, Admiral Korthnex began. Quantum resonance cascade, Chun confirmed. If we can destabilize the exotic matter that makes up Voidborn ships, we can create a chain reaction that will destroy their entire fleet. That device has never been successfully tested. Dr. Sylth protested. The energy requirements alone, which is why we need the other 5 ships to channel their power into ours, Chen explained calmly. It'll overload their systems, but it should provide enough energy to make this work. The remaining human ships moved into contact formation, their hulls almost touching as they began transferring power to the Humanity's Pride. Warning alarms sounded across all 6 vessels as their power systems were pushed far beyond safe parameters. Quantum resonance generator charging, reported the Pride's engineering officer. Estimate 30 seconds to full power. The Voidborn dreadnought, recognizing the threat, began moving to intercept. Dark energy beams struck the human formation, but the 5 escort vessels absorbed the damage with their combined shields, protecting the Pride while it completed its charging sequence. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported the Phoenix's damage control officer. Life support failing. Stay in formation, Chun ordered. 20 more seconds. The corvette Thunder exploded as a Voidborn beam overwhelmed its shields, but the remaining 4 ships maintained position, their crews dying to buy those crucial seconds. Commander Zexai watched human courage and sacrifice on a scale that challenged everything he thought he knew about civilized warfare. 15 seconds, called the engineering officer. The frigate Solidarity lost containment on its power core, but instead of ejecting it safely, her crew kept it online long enough to transfer their remaining power to the Pride. The ship died in a fusion fire that painted space in brilliant light. 10 seconds. The destroyer Relentless took a direct hit that severed her hull, but her captain managed to maintain power transfer even as her ship broke apart around her. 5 seconds. Only the Indomitable remained alongside the Pride, both ships glowing with barely contained energy as their crews pushed systems to the breaking point. Firing, Chen announced. The quantum resonance generator discharged, sending a pulse of exotic energy toward the void-born dreadnought. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the alien vessel began to resonate. The effect started small, a tremor in the ship's impossible geometry, a flicker in its dark energy fields. But the resonance built on itself, creating harmonics that spread throughout the vessel's exotic matter structure. Within seconds, the massive dreadnought was vibrating itself apart at the molecular level. The chain reaction spread to the surviving void-born vessels, their exotic matter hulls resonating in sympathy with their command ship. One by one, the alien vessels began breaking apart as their fundamental structure destabilized. "It's working," Admiral Korthnex breathed, watching the entire void-born fleet dissolve into expanding clouds of exotic particles. But the victory came at a cost that left the surviving fleet in stunned silence. Of the 43 human ships that had begun the battle, only 2 remained: the heavily damaged Indomitable and the Humanity's Pride, which had expended so much power that her engines were dead and life support was failing. Casualty report: Admiral Korthnex requested quietly. 7,432 human personnel confirmed killed in action, came the somber reply. 41 ships destroyed. But, Admiral, the void-born fleet is completely eliminated. The tactical display showed empty space where the invasion force had been. The threat that had consumed 17 star systems, that had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was gone. Destroyed by a species that most of the galaxy considered primitive, using tactics that violated every principle of advanced warfare. In the aftermath, as rescue ships moved to collect survivors and tend to the wounded, Commander HFY found himself aboard the Humanity's Pride, helping with damage control efforts. The ship's corridors were filled with smoke and the acrid smell of burned electronics, but the crew continued working with quiet determination. He found Captain Shun on the bridge, coordinating rescue efforts despite burns on her arms and a concussion that had her medical officer worried. She looked up as he approached, offering a tired smile. "Congratulations, Commander," she said. "Looks like your people will get to see another sunrise." "Our people," HFY corrected. "After today, I think the distinction is less important than I once thought." She nodded slowly. "That's the thing about fighting alongside someone. After you've shared blood and fire, species doesn't matter as much." Around them, human and alien crew members worked side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of shared purpose. It was a sight that would be repeated across the galaxy in the years to come, as the events of this day changed everything about how the hegemony understood warfare, courage, and the true meaning of alliance. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler's Stand, as historians had begun calling it, the galaxy was still struggling to understand what had happened. The Hegemony Council chambers, usually filled with the measured debate of advanced civilizations, buzzed with an energy that hadn't been seen in centuries. Commander HFY stood before the assembled representatives, his crystalline exoskeleton showing the stress fractures he'd earned during the final desperate hours of the battle. Beside him, Captain Shun wore her new uniform, the black and gold of a Hegemony Admiral, a rank that had been created specifically to accommodate her unique position as the architect of victory against the Voidborn. The implications of human tactical doctrine extend far beyond a single engagement, HFY was saying, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. Every simulation we've run since the battle confirms what we witnessed. Conventional hegemony strategy would have resulted in complete defeat within 6 engagements. The representative from the Corvian Collective, a species renowned for their analytical minds, leaned forward. "Commander, while we acknowledge the success at Kepler's Stand, we must consider that the Voidborn may have been a unique case. Their energy absorption capabilities made them vulnerable to unconventional tactics, but against a more traditional enemy." "Respectfully, Counselor," Admiral Chen interrupted, "the Voidborn weren't defeated because of their specific weaknesses. They were defeated because they couldn't adapt to chaos fast enough." She activated a holographic display showing combat footage from the battle, human ships performing maneuvers that still made alien tacticians dizzy to watch. Every military doctrine in hegemony space is based on the same principle: optimal efficiency through predictable patterns. Your ships move in formations calculated for maximum firepower distribution. Your tactics follow logical progressions designed to minimize casualties while maximizing effect. The display shifted to show void-born movements, mathematical precision, optimal positioning, perfect coordination. The enemy used the same principles, just more effectively. They won 17 engagements because they out-optimized you. But humans don't fight optimally. Counselor Vex of the Altarian Republic, whose species prided itself on logical thinking, spoke up. Admiral Chun, surely you're not suggesting that inefficiency is somehow superior to careful planning? Chin's smile was sharp. I'm suggesting that what you call inefficiency, we call adaptability. When your perfectly planned strategy encounters something unexpected, your forces need time to analyze, recalculate, and develop new plans. Human forces adapt in real time because we train for chaos, not perfection. The debate had been raging for weeks, ever since preliminary reports of the battle had reached the core worlds. The human victory had sparked a fundamental crisis in military thinking across the hegemony. Species that had spent millennia perfecting elegant, logical warfare suddenly found their doctrines called into question by what many still considered primitive tactics. Dr. HFY, the hegemony's chief military strategist, stood to address the assembly. The mathematics division has completed their analysis of human combat patterns. The statistical models are disturbing. She activated her own display, showing probability curves and tactical assessments. Human military doctrine appears to intentionally incorporate random variables. They train their officers to make decisions that optimal strategy would consider wrong. In any given engagement, human forces will suffer higher initial casualties than comparable hegemony units. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. Species that had evolved beyond the need for warfare found the idea of accepting unnecessary losses almost incomprehensible. However, Dr. Iswell continued, in prolonged conflicts or against adaptive enemies, human forces show a 73% higher probability of ultimate victory. They win wars by being willing to lose battles. The Nithek representative, General Korth, stood with the fluid motion of a born warrior. With respect to the analysis, some of us remember what warfare truly means. My people fought for glory and honor long before we joined the hegemony. But even we never developed the level of control madness that humans display. Admiral Chun turned to face the Nithek warrior. General, what's the most important quality in a Nithek fighter? Individual skill, Korth replied immediately. The ability to defeat any opponent in single combat. And for Caltharians? Commander Zexai answered, coordination. Perfect unity of purpose and action. For humans, Chun said, it's adaptability. We don't train our soldiers to be the best at any single skill. We train them to become whatever the situation requires. A human marine might be a medic in the morning, a demolitions expert in the afternoon, and a sniper by evening. She gestured to the tactical display, showing human ship movements during the battle. Look at how our formations changed. We started as coordinators, became raiders, then transformed into desperate defenders, and finally functioned as a single sacrificial weapon. For completely different tactical roles in one engagement. Counselor Thex of the Hegemony Science Division raised a question that had been troubling many representatives. Admiral, the casualty rates among human forces were catastrophic. 85% losses in a single engagement. How do you justify such costs? The chamber fell silent. This was the heart of the debate, whether any victory was worth the price humanity had paid. Chin was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful rather than defensive. Counselor, let me ask you something. How many beings died when the Voidborn consumed the Altarian colonies? Approximately 400 million, Thex replied quietly. And the Corvian industrial worlds? 2.3 billion. 17 systems, Chun continued relentlessly. 11 billion sentient beings consumed or killed by an enemy that showed no signs of slowing down. Our projections indicated that the Voidborn would have reached the core worlds within 18 months, with a conservative estimate of 100 billion casualties. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. 8,500 human lives to save 100 billion others. Counselor, with respect, the mathematics are quite clear. But Zexai could see that Chin's words carried a weight beyond simple calculation. During their time together after the battle, He'd learned that humans felt the loss of their comrades in ways that other species struggled to understand. Each name on the casualty list represented not just a tactical loss, but a personal tragedy. The question before this council, Chun continued, isn't whether human tactics are civilized or optimal. The question is whether you're willing to learn them before the next existential threat appears. The representative from the Yalan Confederacy, a species known for their diplomatic skills, leaned forward. Admiral, what exactly are you proposing? Integration, Chun replied immediately. Not just human observers attached to hegemony fleets, but true integration. Mixed crews, shared training, combined doctrine that incorporates both optimal efficiency and chaotic adaptability. The suggestion caused an uproar. The idea of mixing crews from different species was controversial enough, but incorporating chaotic elements into military doctrine challenged fundamental assumptions about advanced warfare. The training requirements alone, began Counselor Vex, are significant but manageable, Chun agreed. We're not asking every species to fight like humans. We're suggesting that every fleet include human elements, and that every operation plan for the unexpected. She activated another display, showing proposed fleet compositions. Imagine Caltharian precision supported by human adaptability. Nithek warrior culture backed by human willingness to sacrifice. Corvian analytical capabilities enhanced by human intuition. It would require complete restructuring of our military philosophy, observed Dr. Sylth. Yes, Chun agreed simply. Because your current philosophy was systematically defeated by every enemy you've faced recently. The Voidborn, the Shadow Wars, the Quantum Pirates, all of them succeeded because they found ways to out-optimize your optimization. General Korth spoke up, his voice carrying the respect of one warrior for another. The humans have proven their courage beyond question. But Admiral Chun raises a broader point. Perhaps our evolution beyond primitive warfare has made us vulnerable to those who haven't evolved beyond it. The debate continued for hours, touching on everything from crew integration protocols to the psychological impact of human tactical doctrine on more peaceful species. Some representatives argued that adopting human methods would represent a step backward for galactic civilization. Others contended that survival required adaptation, regardless of philosophical comfort. Finally, Admiral Korthnex of the Hegemony Defense Force stood to address the assembly. The veteran commander had been notably quiet during the debates, her expression thoughtful as she listened to the various arguments. Honored representatives, she began, I was present at Kepler's stand. I watched human crews die with smiles on their faces, convinced that their sacrifice would save beings they'd never met. I saw tactical formations that violated every principle of space combat, somehow achieve perfect coordination under impossible circumstances. She paused, her forearms gesturing toward the casualty displays. But, more importantly, I saw what happens when different species truly fight together instead of merely alongside each other. The human victory wasn't just about their tactics. It was about their ability to make every other species in the fleet fight better than they'd ever fought before. The chamber was silent as Korthnex continued. Commander Zexai's battle group performed at 130% of normal efficiency during the engagement. General Vorth's raiders achieved targeting accuracy rates that exceeded their previous records by 40%. Every unit that fought alongside humans showed marked improvement in combat effectiveness. She gestured to Zexai and Chun. These two officers have spent the last 3 months developing integration protocols based on their battle experience. I move that the Hegemony Council approve immediate implementation of the Human Integration Initiative. The vote, when it came, was closer than many expected, but decisive enough to carry. 14 species in favor, 8 against, with 3 abstentions. The hegemony would begin the most radical restructuring of its military forces in its history. As the representatives dispersed, Zexai found himself standing with Admiral Chun on the observation deck overlooking the council chambers. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see the lights of the capital spreading across the planet's night side, billions of beings going about their lives, unaware that the nature of their protection had just fundamentally changed. Do you think it will work? Zexai asked. Chun was quiet for a moment, watching the lights. The integration? It'll be messy. There will be cultural conflicts, training disasters, probably a few small wars fought in mess halls over proper combat etiquette. But, yes, I think it will work. Because the alternative is waiting for the next enemy to show up with something we haven't seen before. She turned to face him. Besides, humans aren't the only species with hidden strengths. This integration works both ways. We have as much to learn from you as you do from us. Zexai considered this. In the months since the battle, he'd come to appreciate aspects of Caltharian military culture that he'd previously taken for granted. Human tactical doctrine might embrace chaos, but Caltharian precision was still essential for making that chaos effective. The first integrated crew rotations begin next week, he observed. Nervous? Shin asked with a slight smile. Terrified, Zexai admitted. But I've learned that sometimes the most terrifying decisions are the most necessary ones. As they watched the city below, both officers could feel the weight of the change they'd helped set in motion. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when the best of every species was combined with the chaos and courage that humans brought to warfare. It was going to be interesting. 5 years after the Battle of Kepler's Stand, the galaxy had become a very different place. The massive dreadnought Unity's forge represented everything the Human Integration Initiative had achieved and everything it had cost. Its crew of 15,000 included representatives from 23 species. Its tactics combined the best of a dozen military traditions, and its battle record was unmatched in hegemony history. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge, watching the final preparations for what intelligence suggested would be the largest military operation since the Voidborn War. The enemy this time was different. The Entropy Syndicate, a coalition of machine intelligences that had declared biological life and inefficiency to be corrected. Unlike the Voidborn's raw destructive power, the Syndicate fought with perfect mathematical precision, adapting faster than any biological mind could counter. Final fleet status report, she requested, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had redefined galactic warfare. Commander Zexai, now bearing the rank insignia of Admiral in the Hegemony Defense Force, stepped forward. His crystalline exoskeleton bore new markings, honor scars earned in a dozen battles alongside human crews. Combined fleet reports ready for operation. 237 vessels organized in integrated battle groups. The fleet that had assembled was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Massive Caltharian dreadnoughts flew alongside nimble human corvettes. Nithek attack squadrons coordinated with Altarian support vessels. The rigid species-based formations of the old hegemony had given way to mixed units, where tactical role mattered more than genetic origin. How are the new crews performing? Chen asked. Admiral Korthnex, now commander of the 3rd Integrated Strike Force, answered with satisfaction evident in her voice. Integration efficiency has reached 94%. The Thylorian navigators have finally stopped trying to correct errors in human tactical planning, and the human Marines have learned not to physically tackle hegemony officers when they disagree with orders. Chen smiled at that. The early days of integration had been challenging, to put it mildly. Cultural conflicts, communication breakdowns, and several incidents that required diplomatic intervention had marked the first 2 years. But gradually, something remarkable had emerged. Crews that fought not like humans or Caltharians or Nithek, but like something entirely new. Sir, interrupted Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. Incoming priority transmission from Hegemony Command. The main display activated, showing the familiar form of Supreme Admiral Vexthal, the Corvian who had assumed overall command of the Hegemony Defense Forces. His usually calm, analytical demeanor showed signs of strain. Admiral Chun, Admiral Zexai. He began without preamble. The situation has deteriorated beyond our projections. Syndicate forces have penetrated the outer rim defenses faster than anticipated. They've destroyed the 5th and 9th fleets. Shocked murmurs ran through the bridge. The 5th Fleet had been commanded by Admiral Rodriguez, one of the heroes of Kepler's Stand. The 9th had included 3 of the new integrated dreadnoughts. Casualties? Chen asked quietly. Total, Vexthal replied grimly. No será diversificados. The Syndicate machines appear to have adapted to our integrated tactics with disturbing efficiency. They're specifically targeting human crew members to disrupt coordination patterns. Chun felt a familiar cold settle in her stomach. The same feeling she'd experienced watching human ships die at Kepler's stand. But this time, it wasn't just human lives at stake. The integration initiative had created bonds between species that ran deeper than mere military cooperation. Mixed crews didn't just fight together. They had become families. "What are our orders, Admiral?" Zexai asked. "Operation Last Stand," Vexthal replied. "Intelligence suggests the Syndicate is concentrating their forces for a final push toward the core worlds. Your fleet represents 60% of remaining hegemony naval strength. You are to engage the enemy at the Nexus Point and prevent their advance at all costs. The Nexus Point, a gravitational anomaly that created the only stable hyperspace route to the inner systems. Control it, and you controlled access to the heart of hegemony space. Lose it, and 20 billion beings would be at the mercy of machines that considered biological life a computational error." "Understood," Chen replied. "Time to contact, 18 hours. As the transmission ended, Chun turned to address her bridge crew. Humans, Caltharians, Nithek, Altarians, and half a dozen other species working in the seamless coordination that had taken years to develop. "You heard the orders," she said simply. 18 hours until we find out if everything we've built together means anything." The next few hours were spent in intense preparation. Throughout the fleet, crews ran final system checks and reviewed tactical plans that incorporated lessons learned from 5 years of integrated operations. But beneath the professional activity, Chun could sense the undercurrent of fear that ran through every ship. This wasn't like Kepler's stand, where human sacrifice had surprised an overconfident enemy. The Syndicate had studied every battle of the integration period, analyzing patterns and developing countermeasures. They knew exactly how integrated crews functioned, and they designed their tactics specifically to exploit that knowledge. Admiral called Lieutenant Commander Kim from the tactical station, the same Sarah Kim who had survived the battle at Kepler's stand and gone on to become one of the finest tactical officers in the fleet. "Long-range sensors are detecting the Syndicate fleet. Estimated strength, 240 vessels." Chen nodded grimly. Roughly equal numbers, but the enemy ships were larger, more heavily armed, and crewed by artificial intelligences that didn't suffer from fatigue, fear, or the communication delays that affected biological crews. "Formation orders?" Zexai asked. Chun studied the tactical display, considering options that would have been impossible before integration. The old hegemony would have formed traditional battle lines, relying on overwhelming firepower to achieve victory. But integrated crews opened up possibilities that no single species could have achieved alone. Pattern Omega-7, she decided. Full-spectrum integration. Across the fleet, ships began moving into a formation that defied conventional military logic. Large vessels mixed with small ones in apparently random patterns. Heavy assault ships took positions that seemed designed for reconnaissance. Support vessels moved to forward positions while main battle units fell back. To an outside observer, it looked like chaos. To the Syndicate machines analyzing the formation, it would be nearly impossible to predict what each ship's tactical role would be once combat began. "All ships report ready," Admiral Korthnex announced from her flagship. "Human crews have distributed tactical surprises to all vessels." Chen smiled at that phrase. Over the years, tactical surprises had become fleet slang for the improvised weapons and modified systems that human engineers inevitably developed when given access to alien technology. No two integrated ships carried exactly the same modifications, making it impossible for enemies to predict their capabilities. "Fleet-wide address," Chun ordered. Throughout the combined fleet, crews turned their attention to the main communication channels as Admiral Chen's image appeared on screens across 200 ships. 5 years ago, she began, humans fought alongside the hegemony for the first time. We won that battle, but at a cost that left many questioning whether the price of victory was too high. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Today, we're not just humans fighting alongside aliens, or aliens fighting alongside humans. Today, we're one fleet, one people, facing an enemy that wants to reduce the galaxy to mathematical equations. On 100 ships, crews of mixed species listened with the attention of beings who had learned to trust each other with their lives. "The Syndicate machines think they understand us," Chen continued. "They've analyzed our tactics, calculated our responses, optimize their strategies to defeat integrated forces. They believe warfare is a problem that can be solved through superior processing power. Her voice hardened. They're about to learn that some problems can't be solved. They can only be survived. And when it comes to survival, nobody beats a crew that's learned to fight as family. As the enemy fleet came into weapons range, the first Syndicate salvo demonstrated exactly how much they'd learned about fighting integrated forces. Instead of targeting capital ships or obvious tactical priorities, their weapons focused on communication relays and coordination systems, attempting to break the complex interconnections that made integrated crews function. Communications array hit, reported the sensor officer aboard the Unity's forge. Signal coherence down to 70%. But the Syndicate had made one critical miscalculation. They'd assumed that integrated crews relied on technology for their coordination. In reality, 5 years of fighting together had created bonds that went beyond mere communication systems. Throughout the fleet, crews began implementing protocols that had never been formally written down, backup communication methods developed through shared experience, tactical understanding that required no words. When the frigate Harmony lost its quantum communicator, a NITHEC navigation officer began transmitting position data through modulated engine emissions, a technique she'd learned from her human engineering partner during a training exercise 3 years earlier. Return fire, Chun ordered. Pattern Delta Chaos. The fleet's response was everything the Syndicate hadn't expected. Instead of coordinated volleys or predictable targeting priorities, each ship opened fire according to its own assessment of the tactical situation. Some focused on obvious targets, others chose seemingly random enemy vessels, and a few held their fire entirely, waiting for opportunities that only they could recognize. The result was a barrage that the Syndicate's processing systems couldn't effectively analyze or counter. Their defensive patterns, optimized for logical attack sequences, struggled to adapt to what appeared to be random fire distribution. First blood to us, Admiral Korthnex reported. Syndicate cruiser destroyed, 2 more showing damage. But the enemy adapted quickly. Syndicate vessels began breaking their perfect formations, spreading out to reduce the effectiveness of concentrated fire. Their weapons shifted from infrastructure targeting to focusing on individual ships that showed tactical initiative. The battle developed into a grinding engagement where neither side could achieve decisive advantage. Syndicate precision and processing power balanced against hegemony adaptability and creative tactics. Ships died on both sides as the engagement stretched for minutes and hours. Then, something happened that changed everything. The human destroyer Indefatigable took a direct hit that should have destroyed it instantly. The ship's quantum core destabilized, its hull breached in 17 places, and its command crew was killed. By all tactical calculations, the vessel was finished. But the ship's Caltharian engineering officer, working with a human damage control team, managed something that violated most principles of physics. Instead of ejecting the failing quantum core, they modified it on the fly, turning the controlled explosion into a weapon. The Indefatigable accelerated toward the Syndicate flagship, its hull glowing with barely contained energy. At the last moment, the modified core discharged, creating a quantum resonance field that overloaded every Syndicate processing system within 10 kilometers. 7 enemy vessels simply stopped functioning, their artificial intelligences overwhelmed by quantum noise they couldn't filter out. Impossible, Admiral Zexhai breathed. The coordination required. Possible, Chun corrected, when your engineering officer trusts her damage control team completely, and her team trusts her understanding of quantum mechanics absolutely. The sacrifice of the Indefatigable created an opening that the fleet exploited ruthlessly. Ships that had been holding back surged forward, pouring fire into the temporarily disabled Syndicate vessels. But, more importantly, crews throughout the fleet began implementing similar coordinated sacrifices, using damaged ships as weapons, coordinating between species in ways that no artificial intelligence could predict or counter. When the battle finally ended, nearly 12 hours after it had begun, the space around the nexus point was filled with wreckage from both fleets. The hegemony had held, but at a cost that left survivors stunned by their own losses. Final casualty report, Chin requested wearily. 47 ships destroyed, 31 heavily damaged, came the reply. Estimated crew losses 68,000. Chen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every name that would be added to the memorial walls. But mixed with the grief was something else, pride in what integrated crews had accomplished, and hope for what the galaxy had become. Admiral Zexhai said quietly, "The Syndicate fleet is completely destroyed. More importantly, our analysis suggests this was their main force. Without it, their remaining units won't pose a significant threat to core systems." As rescue operations began and the fleet started the long journey home, Sean found herself thinking about the changes that 5 years of integration had brought. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate species cooperating out of necessity. It had become something new, a civilization where tactical brilliance could come from the combination of human chaos and Caltharian precision, where Nithet courage could be enhanced by Altarian analytical thinking, where survival depended not on any single species' strengths but on their combined ability to become more than the sum of their parts. The legends born at Kepler's stand had grown into something larger, a new way of thinking about what it meant to fight together, to survive together, and to build a galaxy worth protecting. And somewhere in the quantum foam between stars, the galaxy itself had learned that some equations could only be solved through courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds forged when different species choose to trust each other with everything they have.